Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerds Dave, and today I have a return guest, James Introcaso. How you doing, bud?
Woo! I'm good, bud. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So this is awesome.
I appreciate you coming on. It's a little last minute. Our other guests didn't make it. We're not sure what happened. Hopefully they're okay. But
Of course.
things happen,
Yeah,
right? Things happen all the time. We
for
forgot.
sure.
We forgot to confirm the day before, which is can be an issue, especially in these times, man. I feel like it's like, what day is it? What's going on? The world is burning. Like, it's hard. It's hard to stay focused sometimes with so much going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But on the plus side, it just so happens we had been chatting this morning about your Kickstarter going
That's
live,
right.
which the link is in the description, and it sounds like a really cool premise. It's actually kind of similar to Out of the Box, but not quite. The utility is the same, I would say, and it's a very, very cool concept. Obviously, we think so. Uh,
Thank you. Thank you.
and it's for 5e, so I feel like that hits the sweet spot for our audience as well as us. And you're also working with some really cool people on this project.
I am. Yeah, I'm working with Mike Shea, who goes by Sly Flourish online, and a guy named Scott Fitzgerald Gray, who, among other things, has edited most of the fifth edition books. Also worked on fourth and third. He's been in the game a long, long time, and is also a game designer and a layout whiz and good at graphic design. He could really be writing the book himself. I'm not sure that he needs me and Mike at all. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's kind of a legend, but it's one of those people you don't really, you don't hear about as much. It's not well, anyone in the design business, it's like your name is in all the books, but nobody like knows who you are a lot of times, except for the diehards, which is really unfortunate because like this is a lesson that I kind of learned from doing these live chats. Is like, oh, like I would have someone on and not realize their body of work and be like, oh, like, I've had your name in my hands for decades now with all these cool products. And so I kind of felt like an ass. Now I try and pay a little bit more attention to like, who's making this cool stuff that, gives us so much joy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think too, right? Like you have written and put together, produced a book, right? And so the amount of work it takes to get something like that done now too. And Scott, Scott's presence online, he's there. Everybody should follow him. He's great, but he's so busy working that I think he doesn't have the time to be like, let me get on Twitter and tweet the way that I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain extent, they don't have like guys like that don't have to. They're just working,
Yeah,
right?
he's so good. Yeah.
I mean, well, you're so good too, but you're still like newer. So you're still like promoting and getting the word out there, and also, and you do like strictly like freelancing, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I do a lot of freelancing. Scott does actually too, and Mike, Mike freelances in this industry as well. He's got, but he basically writes things that he wants to write. Right. He has his own company. The Sly Flourish Empire is kind of growing, and that's how this book kind of came about. Right. Mike and I were talking one day, and he had just finished up his latest project, and I had finished up something. And Mike and I have been friends for a while. I wrote to him when I wanted to get started podcasting, and with advice and for advice, and he was very kind and wrote back to me and stuff. And then we realized that he lived in Virginia, and I also lived in Virginia at the time. So I played games at his house, like he's been my dungeon master. So anyway, we were chatting, and as we often do. And I said, like, we've played games together, we've done podcasts and stuff, but we've never worked together. I would love to work with you on something. And so we put together a list of ideas, and this book of boss battles kind of came out of it. And then we asked Scott to be involved as well, because Scott is, as aforementioned, just a genius and great, and really, really great collaborators, both of them, to work with. And so that's how this idea came about, because we thought, like, what's a thing that we like to design, but that is a lot of work? And we thought, like, most DMs know how to throw together a battle, right? Like that's one of your main jobs in D&D as a DM is build a combat encounter. But boss battles should be special, right? They're special in video games, they're special in movies, they're special in books and comic books and stuff like that. So like and we always want that in our games as DMs, right? We want to feel the this was hard, but also the players were able to overcome it. We want to feel that balance. We want to feel the balance of like the story, right? Like never is a boss battle in a great story just like a bunch of people beating up a dragon, right? Like there's other stuff going on that they're in a volcanic cavern that's about to erupt, and there's also a group of captive humanoids that need to be saved and things like that. So we thought about like how can we put together a book of battles that you can like drop right into your game and play, right? And you can either build up to them because we have a bunch of story hooks that are in there that you can build up to, or you can just throw down a lair and it can be a fun night of play, a one shot, or the players went left when I thought they were going to go right. You're kind of prepared and ready to roll. So that's where it came from.
It sounds like a fun project to work on, right? Because like I feel like part of design, like that's one of the areas where we really like to get in there and play. Like that's the culmination of the dungeon, the story, the plot is that boss battle. So like that's the one I think we feel like we look forward to running for the players. Like that's kind of the point. So yeah, that sounds like fun to work on. Also, I love the cover that was going around, or the piece of art that was going around. It's like a cobra or a naga with wings.
Yes, yeah. So that's one of the things, right, that we talked about a lot is like you want bosses that are memorable and unique, right? And I think D&D is a game. It's so pervasive. It's been around. Even people who've been playing D&D for like just a year can tell you what a beholder is and what it does usually, right? Because they've learned, they've heard stories of it by being part of the culture and that kind of thing. And so one thing we like to do is like, what makes this Naga better than the rest, right? Like what's gonna make it stick out in your mind? And what will make it stick out in your mind is when it unfurls like 12 feet of bat wings, right, from its back as it gets up and starts blasting you with lightning from the air as its army of gnolls attack you. That's the kind of thing that we are going for, is what is the unique moments and what makes a boss unique and separates it from other night hags and stuff like that. So that Naga has wings, and that Naga does appear in the book as one of the bosses, and there's a reason it has wings and everything like that, right? So we always sort of wanted to lead with story and the story hooks and like what is going to make a really cool showdown, but also why are the other than to have a great fight, why are people going into this lair? And so we wanted to make sure that was always there too.
Are you saying that's not enough alone?
I think sometimes it is, right? Sometimes you just want to fight a bunch of zombies in D&D, and that's fine. Yeah. And that's good, right? And the necromancer is there at the end. But if you need more of a reason, they're in this book, right? And the lairs are pretty unexpected, right? So like we didn't want to write a bunch of caves over and over again. And so we tried to come up with challenge ourselves to come up with all different kinds of lairs, and not everything's a ruin, right? We have one of the lairs is a candy shop.
Oh my god, that is awesome. Who came up with that one?
I did. Nice. I did.
Kudos, man.
Yeah, and so you can see we've got two examples of lairs. One is a cave where there's a fey-touched cockatrice in there, and all of the cockatrice babies are running around and stuff, and that's really fun. And then there's another lair that is a mobile fortress that is disguised to look like a red dragon. And those previews right now are actually up on the Kickstarter page. People can grab them for free and start playing with them right now. So right, like a lair can be a mobile thing. There's all kinds of cool stuff, and we got 10 to start. And then our stretch goals are basically adding more layers as we go. We hope to be able to have at least 20 layers and cover every single level of play. And the layers also come with tips to like adjust them up or down the challenge rating. Like, hey, this layer that's meant for a night hag, you could swap in a green hag if you want it to be easier, right? Or you could swap in an Oni if you want it to be harder, that kind of thing.
So when you say layers, like, is it just the encounter space for the big boss? But it doesn't sound like that. It's actually the whole quote, dungeon, right? Whatever the dungeon is.
Yeah, so each layer is short. I would say between like 3 and 7 rooms each layer is. And the idea is that you can either drop it in and say present it as this is the entire layer, right? Or you could build off of it and say there's more to this candy shop, there's more to this cave complex, this machine is bigger than it seems. And go from there. We really wanted to make it as flexible as possible for the DMs. So like I said, each chapter can be a short adventure if you want it to be. Or you can totally build up to it, and we have story hooks and say like, hey, here are some events and some adventures that might lead up to this being like your capstone battle, right? If you want to have a battle in this zoo, it could be a little zoo, or it could be a much bigger zoo. With way more animals and stuff like that. So that's kind of the idea.
Who do you have doing your cartography, your maps?
Oh, great question. So we have a bunch of different people doing the cartography. So we have Derek Ruiz, Elven Tower, has done several of our maps, and he is just amazing. He actually did that red dragon map that I was talking about earlier. Looks super, super incredible. And then we also have, I'm just pulling up my list here. So Alex Vandera, really, really good cockatrice map from Alex that is also included in the preview. Just looks super, super good. And I think that, so we obviously have some more cartographers who we are going to be calling up as the Kickstarter expands. But right now, those are the two that we can talk about because of contracts and stuff like that. But yeah, we've also got some other great artists, Ali Briggs, Jack Kaiser, Emmanuel Martinez. So we've got some really good people working on this who are going to look great.
Is that a giant cockatrice?
So great question about the you mean in the art on the page.
I'm loving the art. I don't quite have the context to really tell, but it looks very, very savage.
Yes, yeah. So that's a Fey touched cockatrice. It's a little bigger than the average cockatrice, and it's got some magic powers beyond it. Believe me, it can turn people to stone, right? But it's also got some powers that are going to help it make you stone, right?
They'll stone you when you're walking through the dungeon.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really, really fun to be able to think of like what is going to be like a fun version of this creature. And Mike said, like, I want to, for a level 1 dungeon, I want to have a boss monster that's unexpected, right? Everybody expects, the goblin boss or that kind of thing, right? The kobold chief, things that we have seen over and over and over again in adventures. And I think Mike was like, I want to see if I can do something different, have like a monster that isn't humanoid in here. And can I make this interesting and cool and still keep it like appropriate for level 1 characters, right? Like an Ankeg at level 1 is going to tear your party apart, no contest. And he came up with this idea for like a beefy cockatrice. And it has been really fun to play with. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, you can find the Kickstarter in the pinned post. There's a link there. I see a question in the chat. So,
thank you for whoever asked that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, on all of these, we've actually gone away from the description. We just pin it in the post pin it in the comment. So, What's some advice you can give for just encounter design? Let's delve into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think the big thing, right, is if you're not publishing a book, one thing to keep in mind when you're with your encounter designs is you can change stuff on the fly, right? So as you're running a game, and I even do this when I'm running published material, unless I'm like play testing it, right? Um, to say, like, I don't know if you are about to fight a vampire. If you have a party that's all clerics and paladins, it's going to be a lot easier than if you have a party that's all rogues and bards, right? And so that's one of the things to keep in mind is that you have dials that you can turn your hand on during the battle. And kind of the two most common dials are hit points, right? Which you can turn up for, let's say, your boss right out of the gate, it takes a bunch of hits. Maybe the players get lucky and roll 2 or 3 critical hits in a row, right? In the first round of combat, you can say, well, hey, guess what? This thing has more hit points. That little hit die number in the stat block is a range that you can choose that will still keep the creature challenge rating appropriate. And guess what? You can even exceed that range if you want to, right? And the same thing, if the battle is dragging on and it's like very clear the players are going to win, you can just turn that dial back down to 1. They have 1 hit point now, and the next hit is going to end them, right? The other dial that I think about a lot is damage. I think a creature can become very scary very quick by if you increasing their damage a little bit or decreasing their damage. Maybe you want to use a really cool creature. Maybe you want to throw a beholder at a level 5 party, right? But you don't want that disintegrate ray to be doing as much damage as it does. You can turn that up and down too. So those are like your basic ones to be able to on the fly keep a battle gripping. But then the big things that I think is important to keep in mind is like, what else is going on here, right? So for encounter design tips, you've got your boss. I often find, because of the way D&D works, and it's a game of actions, right? Even if you have like a solo monster who's got legendary actions, I think it's typically good, especially if your group is like 5 or 6 or more players, to bring in some lackeys, right? To bring in some minions, and think about how they complement either the oh, bless you. Think about how they complement your boss's powers, and think about how they also complement the lair, right? And that's the other thing is the lair and the environment. We this is all stuff that gets talked about a lot, but the lair and the environment are important, and also from the sense of like, creatures choose to live in places that benefit their security, right? And so like a lich might live in a cavern filled with poisonous gas because they're immune to poison, right? And so their lackeys are also going to be immune to poison. And a lich is pretty, they're tough, but they don't want fighters and barbarians getting up right next to them to hit them repeatedly. So they probably have some like big beefy ogre zombies or minotaur skeletons, or mummies or something like that. That is a lot of hit points between them and the barbarians that need to be cut down before they can get to the lich. So thinking about those kinds of things are always important. And then the other thing to think about is what else is going on in the lair, right? And how can that be of use to the villain and to the boss monster? So if your villain has captives, hey, when they get down to a certain number of hit points, they're probably going to grab a captive and say, like, take one step closer, right? We see this all the time in movies and books. And that gives your players a dilemma to deal with. And it also ups the stakes of the battle. Maybe they have a doomsday device that causes their lair to explode when they die. Well, now that's really interesting, right? Now we don't want to kill the lich because, this lair is going to blow up and the lich is just going to reappear in its phylactery somewhere else. So, like, thinking about those kinds of things, those twists that are going to make it interesting and giving the players multiple problems to solve, like, yes, you need to kill the boss, but you also need to stop this, or you also need to get this item out of this death trap, right? Those will make for really interesting lair encounters. And think about any Star Wars movie, right? The end is always way more complicated than kick the bad guy's butt. They've got to blow up a Death Star. They've got to steal Death Star plans. It always revolves around a Death Star, right? But
that's one thing we can count on. It's a Death Star.
Right. Exactly. So think about adding those sorts of goals, because D&D, I think we think a lot about like, what is the boss, and how are we gonna how can I make it kick butt? But also give the boss something else that is going on. They're smart. You set up your home to be protected, most of us, right? You might have an alarm system. You probably have strong walls. You've got keys. You've got all that stuff. So you should be doing the same thing in lairs, and thinking about like, what benefits a cockatrice, and why would it choose to have a lair in this cave versus outside in the middle of an open field?
Yeah, some of the things you're talking about made me think of a couple of videos we've done more recently. One of them being Cloudy with a Chance of Monsters. And it was like basically using any of the cloud spells with monsters that have tremor sense or blind sight. But then you can make it even worse because we have several cloud spells that are poisonous. And then you combine that with a monster that has immunity to poisons, incendiary clouds, another one with fire,
yes.
to really like you said, take advantage of the monster's strengths, and because a lot of times like your big bad always gets trashed, but just because of the economy of actions without something extra to make them a little bit scarier. One of the things you mentioned was making it about more than just defeating the monster. We also did, a video, don't be a dummy, use a mummy. And, the idea, the only way to really truly kill the mummy is you got to destroy, or the mummy lord, is you have to destroy the heart.
Right.
And what if you had an arcane machine like Ghostbusters that was like just storing supernatural creatures and the heart was powering it?
Yeah.
So what do? Do you destroy the mummy, or do you let loose all of these abominations and horrors? How do you solve this problem now?
Yeah, that is great. That's the kind of thing, right, that really puts people in a good story choice, right, where it's like, well, I've got to defeat this mummy lord, but I've also got this machine. And then the fun thing about D&D, right, is when the players do the thing you don't expect, and often when you give them a hard choice like that, they find some third way around it, where they're like, I'm just gonna force cage this mummy lord, and then I'm gonna open a gate and send him into the 9 hells. Yeah. and go from there, right? Or that kind of thing. And that advances your story in a way that it's like, yes, this feels like the big moment where I, as the DM, have been surprised and could not be more happy with what the outcome of this is, because you, the players, surprised me in a great way.
Oh yeah, I love that kind of stuff, because then you're like, what happens when the mummy lord comes back from hell, ahead of an army, and maybe more powerful because he's been baptized in hell for a while.
Yeah, immune to fire now, right? That fire vulnerability is now an immunity, and like, oh, how do we defeat a mummy lord, right? Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we were researching mummy lords, we're kind of disappointed how squishy they are. They have all these cool abilities and they hit hard, but but their hit points are so low for the level monster they are.
It really is, and that fire vulnerability is a big thing too, right? And so we're talking about right now mummies, because one of our stretch goals is a mummy lair, and so we're like, how do we make the mummy lord worthy of the title of being an actual boss, right? Yeah. And so we're looking at those same problems.
Yeah, and there's definitely some cool and fun things you can do with it, but it does take a little more thought as the DM if you just throw it out there and you go, they just wiped out my mummy lord with a fireball. Not like empowered, not leveled up, just a regular fireball. Because you're doing double damage. He's going to fail his saving throw.
You are so right. You're so right. Yeah.
And it's like my mummy, and it's actually one of the more thematic monsters in 5e when you look at like the regional effects and the lair actions. It actually has way more lair actions than most of the other creatures with lair actions, but you're like, it's never going to get to use all of these.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, it is lair actions and legendary actions and stuff like that are really interesting, and spells too I think are interesting, because often we have these creatures with these giant spell lists just like characters, but that creature is going to get to cast maybe 5 of those spells before the end of combat.
Yeah.
So I often think about that, and sometimes there's spells that are useful outside of combat that are cool too. Matt Colville has this great video on action-oriented monsters that people should check out if they haven't already, because he really talks about making monsters interesting, and that's like that's essentially what we're trying to do in boss battles, is in the same way, right? In Fantastic Lairs, we're saying like, what are some cool things these monsters can do and unique things, because we want you to have a great time battling and dealing with. Some of the monsters are not the type to throw down right away, and so boss encounters can start one way and end in a fight, or maybe not, and that kind of thing. So we've got stuff like that that's happening too.
So Mighty Hobbs says, Mummy Rot used to be a pretty frightening thing. Now, I'm not sure how 5e changed it, though. It is still frightening until, like, tomorrow, right? Because like, it's just a remove curse spell to get rid of it, and that's not a really particularly high-level spell. Everybody has it on their spell list. And if if you're a caster like a cleric, you just need to wait till tomorrow if you don't have it memorized and get it. It can be harsh that day, but tomorrow the problem is gone.
Yeah, it's the same thing with remove any sort of disease. Gets very easy to remove if you have a paladin in the party, because lay on hands immediately can be removed. So it does make diseases and curses, I think, are scary in 5e if you don't have any healers in your party, which is very rare, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, every single class has magic. I guess it's not official yet. But once they do the what is it? Is it the Wild Soul Barbarian?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Once that happens, every class will have magic, pretty much, to some extent. Dave wants to know. He's got a specific question for you. How many Kickstarters is this for you, James? Do you prefer
me personally? So for me, this is 2. I did the Demon Plague, and I have, and now I've done this one, Fantastic Lairs. For Mike Shea, I think this is his 6th one, maybe his 7th. And Scott's done a couple too. And then I've also, I've contributed here and there to a bunch of them. Contributed to Out of the Box encounters, and a handful of others that I could probably name if I looked up my name on Kickstarter or something. So I'm often a stretch goal. And sometimes I get in the book and sometimes I don't. So yeah, that's kind of where things are right now. So, but for as far as running and creating them go, this is only my 2nd Kickstarter.
But as far as writing goes, see, James, unlike the rest of us, usually doesn't need Kickstarters. He just writes in official products for Wizards of the Coast or Koval Press.
So I did. If we're counting Wizards hardcovers, I have 7 of those that I have worked on, and sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little, and often it's somewhere in between a lot and a little. So
sometimes you write a lot, only a little goes into the book.
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes you're supposed to do a little, and they're like, "Can you do 5 times this amount?"
Yeah. It all depends, and it's like anything, any other project or product like this can really vary, and the scope can change. Life stuff happens, people drop in and out, corporate stuff happens, so sizes of books can change, and they'll say, well, we needed this many words, but actually now we need fewer because the the size of the book we're going to write is 20 pages less than what we thought, 20 pages fewer than what we thought. So but yeah, so for me this is two Kickstarters. So yeah, I'm very excited to be launching it, and we're already off to a really great start. The community has been incredible. We're at $4,800 right now, and we launched at 11 o'clock, so it hasn't even been 2 hours yet. So yeah, thank you to anybody out there who is watching this, who has already pledged or spread the word or just is excited, so really appreciate it.
So how does it feel working on your own stuff as opposed to working on someone else's stuff?
We talk about this a lot, and I think one of the big things is, right, obviously working on your own stuff, you have more sort of creative freedom to say, this is what I want to do, and we're going to go this way. But I have partners in this. Mike and Scott are big time writing partners. And what's been great is we've been meeting every week for months now. And we really have been collaborating. So like Scott and I have our name together in a lot of different books. And this is the first time we have actually worked together in the sense that like I've gotten notes back from Scott and applied them, and then, like passing stuff back and forth. Usually I write stuff with a contact at WotC, like Chris Perkins or whatever, and he's coordinating everything then, right? Like he and Bill Benham, who is the producer there, both very good at making connections and coordinating and that kind of stuff. So in this, the coordination's up to us, but it also means that like we're on our own timeline for this, right? At least before the Kickstarter launches. Now we're on the timeline we promised on the Kickstarter, but we are able to pass ideas back and forth more easily, and it really does lend itself to making a really good product, because we're constantly saying, looking over each other's writing and saying like, now what about this? Oh, it would be really cool if we did this, or if you added this to that. And it's just great. Mike and Scott are geniuses and really know how to take things up another level, and that's been really fun.
I'm sure, like, and both, probably have their pros and cons. When you're writing for someone else, they give you a structure. You just have to, color within the lines. Now it's like there are no lines. You're setting the lines.
Yeah. There's more. There's definitely more pressure, right, when you're doing it yourself. Because if somebody says to me, "Hey, we'd like you to write 5,000 words for this," I write 5,000 words. I might be asked to make some revisions, and then I'm done. That's kind of it, right? In this, it's like write 5,000 words, make revisions. Put it through playtesting, make more revisions, send it off to copy editing, make sure that that's good, look at the layout, hire artists, pay the artists, keep a budget, all that kind of stuff. It falls to us to do that. And so that is sort of the difference. A big part of this is not writing at all, right? So like it's fun. You do this when you take on a project like this, that you're leading with friends, like we're all co-designers in this. It's because you want to be able to write what you write, whatever you want. But then a lot of the work is you've got to do all the support work. Then you've got to put the money up yourself, or get it from Kickstarter or some combination of both, right? Like we put together a preview before the Kickstarter, and so that money had to come from somewhere, right? And so we had to put up that money and all that kind of stuff. It's more of a risk, and it's more work, but you also get to make all the decisions and call the shots. So that's great.
I am familiar with some of that for sure.
Yeah. I was going to say, you might know a thing or two about it, having your own empire here, right? The Nerdarchy empire.
Tiny. Sean wants to know, is that the guy from Kling?
Yes, it is the guy from Kling. Thank you, Sean. Kling was a local band that I was in a long time ago, Dave.
Did you play at Bonnie Rocks?
No, I don't think we did. We played at Doc Watson's pub in Philly.
Okay.
And we played in the Audubon Park VFW, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, we played a bunch of churches and like church basements that you could rent out and VFWs and things like that. I was in high school when the band. Yeah, I was tweeting about it a while back.
Was it a boy band?
No. I mean, in that there were many boys in the band. Yes, we had one woman in the band named Connie, who was in the band for a while. But then yeah. So I actually found a friend named Druten, who I went to high school with, sent me some recordings. Yeah. I don't have our old CD, believe it or not, but he does still. And so he was kind enough last week to send me the music, which I have. So who knows? Maybe one day I will unleash teenage James Screamo onto the internet. But until then, I'll just have to keep up with this game design thing. Were you ever in a band? You have the look of a guy who was in a band.
I have the look, none of the talent. So
that's okay. I was in a band and didn't have any of the talent either, so that doesn't mean anything,
Can't play an instrument, can't sing, so there's that.
Yeah, there you go. That was me. And when you're in a screamo band, you don't even need to sing. You just need to be able to scream really loud into a microphone. So, which is now what I do, but just talking about RPGs instead of over a guitar track.
There you go. Although I would argue the screaming is a whole thing unto itself. I don't know if you've ever heard of the band The Anchor.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So Lindsay Ray. Like, I'm not like a huge fan of the band. I'm just a huge fan of Lindsay Ray, who is like this tiny petite woman who just like has the most guttural screams on the internet. And you're like, that can't be her actual voice. And it totally is. And it's actually really fun. She'll do like Pop Goes Metal. And she'll cover pop songs in this metal voice, and it's just like insane. And I think I don't know if she still is, but I think she was a teacher in Canada. And I just like, oh my God, I just imagine her teaching, like having to yell at the kids, and she's like, "What are you doing?" Except for way like more over the top.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. I love when people do Pop Goes Metal and stuff like that. I think it's a lot of fun. So
I do as well.
Dream of redoing the Critical Role theme in like heavy metal at some point. So who knows?
Oh, make it happen. Can we make that a stretch goal? So Dave wants to know, ever think of having a contributor pledge level?
Oh, cool. That's well, obviously my reaction to that probably belies that I have not thought about that. But yeah, I think I really like contributor pledge levels on projects if they make sense to, right? So like the most recent Tome of Beasts 2 from Koval Press. And actually they did this with Tome of Beasts 1 and the Creature Codex as well. Anybody who backed the project at a certain level could submit a creature, right? Is that what we're talking about when we say contributor levels, right?
That's like, what I feel. I feel like it is.
Yeah. Dave, if I'm wrong, please correct me in chat. But yeah, so I think those are great for books like Creature Codex and Tome of Beasts, because you're going to have 300-400 monsters in there to begin with, right? And so it's great to give a bunch of people a shot at that. For the amount of work, and then to Koval Press's credit, they do pay people for that work too. The amount of work that it would take to have a contributor level for something like Fantastic Lairs, I think would probably be unfair because I would want to pay you for that amount of work that was going to happen. And I couldn't have every backer submit a lair. I guess I could if we wanted to add this is very interesting. It would be a difficult thing to do. They're tricky because you don't want to have people have to pay for a design opportunity, basically. And I think it works if you're already excited about the project and doing it, but I certainly don't want people, for the amount of, we'd probably take like 1, maybe 2 layers if we were going to do that. And that just feels like we're getting a lot of people to pledge who are pledging under the guise of like, I really just want to pay my $15 to be able to have my lair in this book. And maybe you're not going to get picked because we're only picking 2. And maybe you have a great design, but it doesn't get picked because like we already have a night hag lair. We don't need another one or something like that. Whereas with, you know, monsters, Kobold can take 30, 40, 100 monsters from backers if they want to.
Yeah, things that are smaller, bite size, it's a little bit easier. Magic items, spells, monsters, you know, smaller components are easier to put in. Where you've got like all these moving parts, where you have the whole lair, as well as the big boss and the encounter. You know, so that might be like, oh, making a new monster, creating the lair, creating the where the actual fight's going to take place. I don't know how much work you guys are putting into the rest of the lairs, if like they're really detailed, which I guess that's a good question to ask you. How detailed are the lairs?
So they're pretty detailed in the sense of we've got the, you know, those 3 to 8 rooms that are in each lair are fully detailed, just like a dungeon. You know, we talk about what's in these rooms, what's there. Each lair has a background section to go with it, a bunch of story hooks that you can integrate, a section about how you can continue the adventure after, treasure, traps, lackeys, all those things are detailed in there, as well as each layer also has those encounter building kind of scaling up and down guidelines that we were talking about earlier. So you've also got that going for you. You know, if you want to be able to say, this is a great lair, but I don't want a cockatrice in here because my party's already 5th level. We've got some recommendations you can make to swap out the cockatrice and things like that.
Now, are there other monsters in these lairs, or is it just the big boss encounter?
Definitely other monsters, and definitely one of the keys to making a cool boss encounter is softening up the players a little bit with some encounters first, right? So you know, if your players go in, your wizard has every single spell slot, your barbarian has every single hit point, every rage. The boss encounter might be a little bit easier. And so that's one reason why we have some, you know, you'll see most of the lairs have an encounter first, that before you get to the boss, you have 1 or 2 encounters that you within the lair that are going to deplete some of the player's resources unless they're super clever or super lucky.
Now, not gonna lie, I think you guys are underselling this a little bit, right? I feel like my first impression was it's just like, oh, here's the lair and the big boss encounter, but no, it sounds like you're getting mini dungeons for each of these encounters.
Yeah, a big inspiration for us was a 4th edition book called Dungeon Delve, which is, I know I'm bringing up 4th edition, and I can see my Kickstarter numbers going backwards now, right? But I really liked 4th edition's Dungeon Delve book. It was amazing, and it's this book of 20 short lairs that you could build out or build up to, or that kind of thing. And it was really useful for drop-in encounters. And so we said, what if we did this, but we did big boss encounters, right? And made it in 5th edition style. So we put a lot more story into each one, and cool treasure and stuff like that. And it's more modular, right? The approach of Dungeon Delve, right, was a lot of combat, because 4E was a very combat heavy game. 5E certainly is a combat heavy RPG as well, not as much as 4E. And so we talk about like, hey, if you want to sneak around these guards, here's how you might be able to do that. Or if you want to try to trick them, here's how you might be able to do that kind of thing. Or if you want to have a slugfest and, battle on an airship, you can do that too. So yeah, we've got fun stuff planned. So yeah, that's why we went with the Fantastic Lairs title. We had all these like kind of boss battle things, and we were like, well, they're a little bit more than that. We're giving you dungeons to drop into your game. And so hopefully Fantastic Lairs gets that across to people.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to circle back to that a little bit, because that's not what I was getting at all.
Oh,
So, but
heck
so
yeah.
yeah,
Okay, good.
so but that of course just might be me as well. So I'm a little slower than others. So
No,
there's
you're
that.
one of the listen, this man, he talks down about himself all the time, but he is one of the smartest people I know, and a good dude. So everybody should love
Yeah.
Dave because he's the best.
You're
So
too kind, sir. Well, so let's go. So let's move in a different direction. We actually hung out this weekend, sort of,
we did
virtually.
virtually hung out,
Yeah.
virtually hung a couple times. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we have our Saturday game that you kind of started with the birthday crew.
that's right.
Yeah, we had like before the apocalypse struck, we all like hung out for V's birthday from the Crafting Muse and got together, and we just didn't want to see it end. So from that sprung this Saturday game that we've been playing ever since. And you started with your Wildmount campaign, and
That's right.
was it the Frozen Sickness?
Yeah, Frozen Sick. So it's the adventure that I wrote. That's it's like a starter adventure in the Wildmount book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, another writing credit. Yeah, Wizards of the Coast and Critical Role. So we started with that, and then one of the players is like, "I really want to play Ravenloft. Can someone run it?" And DM Jazzy Hands Henyo was like, "Sure, I can do that." So you guys like swapped in the middle of the adventure, which was really cool the way you guys kind of executed that. And so we've been playing that for a bit. And then so we just did a session zero for the Expanse, which I haven't played any Age games yet, and I have not played the Expanse, but I watched the Prime series, which is
Right.
really cool.
Yeah, it's great. It might be my favorite show on TV, and so I'm into it, and my wife Bonnie is really into it too. And she said, "I'm gonna start reading these books. I like the show so much." And then she said, "The books are great. You've got to read them." So I've actually started reading the books now too. I just finished the first one, and it's really fun. And it is. It's a great world because there's science, right? There's a lot of science in the science fiction, but it feels like for the sake of the role-playing game, you can ignore a lot of it when you need to, because they basically say like, this is how the science of space would work to crush you to death in various different ways, and here's how the equipment we built in the future works so that it won't. And so you can kind of say like, cool, as long as I know we have the equipment, we're good, right? And so that's really fun. But I really love the dynamic of the Earth and Mars and the outer planets and the asteroid belt kind of being these distinct different countries almost, right? And I think that's going to be fun. And our session zero led to some great character creation. So
Yeah, it was really good. Like only me and you were the only ones that were familiar with the setting. And I think no one's familiar with the rules yet, right? So we're all kind of learning that together, which is kind of fun. So me and my wife immediately went and started watching that. We finished up Space Force. We watched a couple episodes of Expanse, and I was like, "Hey, let's finish Space Force. We're halfway through, and they're short episodes." Sure.
It's basically the prequel, right? Yeah. The Space Force is the prequel to the Expanse.
Which Space Force is hilarious. It's pretty funny. But so we started watching Expanse, and going through and watching again. I do wish they did subtitles for when the Belters talk, because they use that Belter Creole, and I mean, all Creole is hard to understand for me personally.
Sure, yeah.
So I could use some subtitles.
Yeah, well, and this is like a made up. Belter Creole is so interesting because, right, the Expanse is the year 2350. And so the idea that there's this language that's spoken by people all the way in the outer planets that's a hodgepodge, basically, of a bunch of other languages, right? There's like Spanish and French and Mandarin and Russian, like they're all kind of part of this, plus like a made up sign language that's also part of it. It is really hard to understand. And in the first couple episodes, you actually witness someone from Earth trying to like learn some of it, and how complicated it is just for them to learn one phrase is really interesting.
Yeah, and also, now like after us talking about the game, and I didn't really pay as much attention to this when I watched through the first time is how the Belter Krill has a lot of signing in it, and they use a lot of gestures. And now I'm like, oh, now I see them talking with their hands all the time, and I didn't really think about it much. But because, they're in the vacuum of space, and if something happens to the comms or something, you can't vocalize, but you can. And also, you're probably wearing a spacesuit, right? So that would also change the type of gestures you would probably use.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and they've got to be big. That's kind of the part of the idea, right? Because of your spacesuit, they've got to be they can't be subtle, because you need to show somebody you're basically wearing the world's worst snowsuit.
Yeah, like things where you crook your fingers isn't going to work.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
So the session 0 was super fun to go into. I learned something from that session 0 to maybe do them better in the future.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, because we were talking. Well, because we did the session 0 first, and we were talking about, the characters and the story, and then afterwards we circled back to the social contract part of it. And,
right.
And after like some of the things that were described in the initial part, I'm like, that we should have did the social contract first about like what do players want in the game or don't want in the game. Because in the backstory, it's my fault. I did it. Like I included some like graphic things that were like kind of violence towards children, and I was like, you know what, that could be a trigger for someone, and perhaps we should have discussed that first.
Yeah, and that was me, right, running sort of the session 0. I was like, yeah. When we were talking about that at the end, and you were like, oops, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess. And luckily in our group it turned out okay because that wasn't an issue for a lot of people, but or for anybody. But it was like, oh yeah, I should have. And I think that's a great thing to do, like dive right in to the social contract part and hey, where are your lines and veils and that kind of thing, so that then in character building, right? And I think I got so excited because like what I want to do usually is talk about the characters and then build them, because in the Expanse RPG, you don't really have classes at first level. You do eventually get something that's kind of like a class called I think it's called the career in the Expanse, or a path or something like that. But those come in at like 4th level. So I was like, okay, let's talk about now what we want our characters to do, and then we'll be able to build them this way. Like we'll know. And the other thing you can do is roll, right? We could have gone through and rolled for everything randomly, and we could see what it would generate. But I think that it's more fun if you're going to play for a little bit of a longer term, to let everybody kind of settle into a character they want. Although for me, I feel like I've played so many role-playing games now that I'm like, just give me the random, and I'll come up with something. So I think it all depends on who's playing and who you're playing with and that kind of thing. But yeah, that is a great point. Like social contract first, I think is a great way to go. And I had the same thought when we were having the session.
The epiphany afterwards. And you live, you learn. And so it's me, it's you, it's Ted, it's my wife. And then Runehammer is playing as well, so some folks might be familiar with it. So it's a really fun group. So I'm excited to play it, and it was fun to come up with the story together. Like what happened to bring these characters together, and then we're gonna start like in a prison because of that story we kind of developed together.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the fun, is this, this story that has been developed together, has you all starting out in a prison, which puts you right where I want you. And like, I often think having an adventure that relies on the players being in prison is really hard. Because you've got to get them into the prison. But in this case, you put yourselves in the prison. So I was, it was like very much like, yeah, we did these bad things and we got caught. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Sounds good.
That's fairly easy. So now it's not streamed. We're just playing for fun. Mm-hmm. And also we're all kind of local. So we're hoping that eventually that this game will be in person.
In person. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll do some recaps on our channel. about it.
Oh, that could be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a way
I'd love
for
to
us.
see you and Ted talk about it.
It's a way for us to talk about a different RPG, and like we just don't have the time to learn as many as we like. So like this is like an easy way to do it, where we just like play and learn that way.
That would be awesome.
And then we can like tell all the rules wrong to people on the channel. It'll be great. No, so yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're watching the show now. My wife is like, "Oh, you made your character model after Amos." I'm like, sort of, except for it's more like a mishmash of Fred Johnson and Amos,
right,
for the story. And especially having gone back through, and now we just like past that part where you kind of get like Fred Johnson's story. And like you literally see people floating in space, and he's like witnessing like the atrocities of his actions and what changed him.
I know. He's such a great character, and I was excited to see you latch on. I do think a big part of the Expanse kind of themes is like, can people change, right?
Yeah.
There's kind of always that question in the Expanse, and so it's cool to have a character who off the bat is struggling with like, I did a bad thing, and I know it was bad, and I am sort of trying to repent for it, and that gives me as the GM all kinds of tasty story threads to pull on, to feed to you too, to in turn. Let's see. Have you actually changed or not? We'll find out.
The characters are really complex in the Expanse,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the show anyway. Like Amos is like one of the best examples, because like he's a bad guy that does good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the you have like a. It's like they have this, this person who doesn't really have a moral compass, and I think that's part of the question of Amos, right? Like, is he good? Is he bad? But he always accomplishes things that are for the good, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, is that just because he has the right friends? Or would he be doing this anyway? And I think that's a great question that we probably won't know until the end of the series. And we may still be asking ourselves that question, right?
Yeah. And it's also interesting in the sense that like he makes no bones about what he does and where it falls.
Right.
And he also makes no apologies either. It's just like, but at the same time, and you see it really early on, where he's got a gun to his head and he's like, well, bro, if that's what you gotta do, man, you got a clean shot.
I know. Yeah, he's like, and he's very fearless in a lot of ways, and is also like willing to take some steps. There's a great moment, it's like in the middle of the third season, where he gives this kind of speech to somebody about how they're not the person who is going to take revenge and kill somebody.
Yeah.
And it's just the whole scene is very cool, because you're like, wow, you understand so much more about people than you seem to let on, right? And the way that scene resolves is chilling.
Oh yeah, like he's introduced as this dumb brute, but he's so like as it goes on, he's just so much deeper than that.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's a fun series. So I'm going to jump back into the chat because we did have a question from Dave, and he wanted to know, what is it like to work with the two Matts, Mercer and Koval?
Yes, so great. They're both really, really awesome. And they both are very collaborative, right? So like both of them really want you to put forth your ideas and explain them and defend them and talk about, why you think they're good, and are both open to saying like, yes, absolutely, please, let's do that. Like, take that ball and run with it. Let's see where it goes. And you could not ask as a writer, you could not ask for better than that, right? It's kind of like when I got the out of the box assignment, you all were like, hey, write an encounter. It can literally be any encounter. Like here's some examples. Here's what we would like as far as like length of words and plot twists or anything like that. But like, you organize it this way and go nuts. And so that was awesome. And they are very much want writers to own their work and do that kind of thing. They're also very different, right? So like for Matt Mercer, um, Matt Mercer is extremely, extremely sure about his story in the sense of like it's his world, right? He knows what's happening in Exandria. He knows what the tone is. He knows all of that kind of thing. And so does Matt Colville if you're writing something for his world of Orden, right? And when we were working with Matt, it was kind of like Matt was like, "Hey, here's some broad strokes about places that I'm not really sure about in Exandria. So go forth and like stay true to these broad ideas and see what else you come up with." The same was true with Matt Colville writing the Player's Guide to Capital, right, where he would say like, go forth and write what you are sure about in these neighborhoods. Like, here's what I know about these neighborhoods, and that's true. What else is true? You tell me. And so that was really fun. With Matt Colville, I've also worked on a lot more mechanical things. Kingdoms and Warfare is like this supplement of rules you're going to add to your game. And that has been very cool too, because again, very open, collaborative process. But also, I've gotten to see more of the like how things shift when they are in play testing. And we went out there, all of the designers who are working on the system, me, a guy named Sam Mannell, and Mackenzie De Armas, who are both brilliant and amazing to work with and good collaborators. So we went out there to Orange County. We worked with Matt for like a week, 4 days of meetings, and we came up with this system. And then the system is totally different from what it was when we went out there through playtesting and asking people about it and responses and stuff like that. But I don't think it would be where it is had we not had those meetings, right? Had we not started there. There are still ideas in there that evolved from those meetings. So it's really very fun and great to work with both of them. They're both very cool, very good to their employees, and big on collaboration and sharing.
So I'm looking at your Kickstarter, and congrats, you're a third of the way there.
Thank you.
You guys are definitely on track to do it in the first 48 hours, which would be awesome. But you don't actually have many pledge levels. There's 2 essentially.
That's right.
Third if you count the pledge without a reward.
Sure.
But essentially there's 2.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it appears that it's like, hey, do you want the PDF or do you want the option to print on demand?
Right, which also comes with the PDF if you get the print on demand. There's not a lot of pledge levels here, and that's basically because that's how Mike Shea has often run his Kickstarters, is with PDF and print on demand pledge levels, and that's kind of it. And so that's what we have done here as well. We talked about like, Mike, do you want to, through the Kickstarter, offer some of your other publications, right? Like Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master or Fantastic Locations or anything like that. And his feeling was kind of like, because he's partnered with the 3 of us, or because the 3 of us are partnered on this, they didn't necessarily want to have like bonus levels where you can pick up more of his stuff. And so that's how we ended up where we are right now. It's a pretty straightforward Kickstarter. You either want the PDF or you want the PDF with print, and that's it. So it's simple, it's easy to understand, and we're hoping that through this we get a lot of backers instead of often you find that like, if you do rewards like, hey, we'll play with you at Gen Con, right? Well, is that person going to Gen Con? Is Gen Con happening? All that kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to tell. So that's where we are. We haven't revealed any stretch goals yet, but we do have stretch goals that will be coming. Which are basically going to be more layers for the book to start so that we can really fill this bad boy out.
So do you guys have, and I won't ask you to reveal them, but do you have any like pie in the sky big stretch goals that like, if this does really well, that you have in your back pocket? Because having run our Kickstarter, I found one of the hard part was stretch goals. Like, we had planned out a bunch, and we felt like we spaced them appropriately for the price range and stuff, and then it was like we just shot through them so fast. It's like, what do you want to do now? And like, you have to be really careful when you're planning your stretch goals that you don't overpromise stuff to the point of now your Kickstarter isn't making any money because it's just going back to give these stuff, this stuff to the backers, or even worse than that is you're not making money, but you're actually losing money.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of Kickstarters do get into trouble that way. They get so excited with the stretch goals, they don't think about how much it's going to cost them. Like every page you add to a book, if you're mailing it out yourself, it is going to make the cost of mailing and the cost of the overall Kickstarter more expensive, right? That's one reason we're doing print on demand, right? Is because as we make the book bigger, we don't need to worry about shipping costs. That's something you're going to pay for after the fact. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the bonuses of print on demand is that like it ensures it's safer to run a Kickstarter that way. And so, yeah, that's what we're looking at right now is we're looking at, our stretch goals and that kind of thing. I don't know that we have any super unexpected pie in the sky stuff, but we do have some fun things in store. Like I said, for the first part, it's like we want to add another 10 layers to the book after this initial 10. And so we'll be revealing what those are as we go. And we've already started some work on that, hedging our bets a little bit. So knock on some wood here, because it's good to have stuff written so that you can get it out to the people earlier. So yeah, that's where we are right now with it.
So I just backed it. I think we're 309.
What? Thank you so much.
It seems like a really good project. I'm a huge fan of yours and Mike Shea's for sure, and Scott's as well. So it seemed like the thing to do, and like it's one of those great like super useful products that you can just grab when you need it and put it in your game. It's not like some things like I see people like have a whole campaign setting, right? And it's just too much. I'm probably not going to use it. Like, and with something like this, like you can go, oh, we're playing Forgotten Realms, or we're playing, the Critical Role setting, Wildmont. We're playing whatever, our homebrew. You can just take this and put it right in your game, and it's like, it's super easy. And for us, when we do Kickstarters, all of our products will probably be like that. Instead of like, because people always ask, are you going to do your own campaign setting? I'm like, there's a lot of great campaign settings out there. It seems very limiting.
That's great. And it's one of the things that I like to write, because these are the kinds of books that I like to use at my table, right? And so, and I think some people like to write campaign settings because they like to use them, but I do think a book like this, you're right, does often see more use at more tables, because it can be plugged into any setting. And we also know, Wizards of the Coast has done a lot of research that shows that that they've released, right, that shows that most people are working in their own campaign settings. So if I can give you a product that helps me basically collaborate with you, right? Like this is like me, Scott, and Mike are coming in and saying, hey, here are some ideas that you can add and change, and here's some suggestions for how you might do it. That's fun to me. That's like a really fun way to think about a product. And I know some people, it's more fun for them to say, this is the world, and this is what, this is where you can tell this kind of story, right? But for me, I love using those products that spark imagination and ideas and I can build on. And that's what we're hoping this does, because that's the kind of things we like to use at our tables.
It makes sense. And like you said, just utility and usefulness. Dave wants to know, will there be a hardback option through Drive-Thru?
Gotcha. So we're talking about that being a possible thing, maybe a stretch goal thing. We're looking at it for maybe after we get the next 10 layers as a possible stretch goal. We're not 100% yet, because we don't want it to be so thin that the cover is like bigger than the book, but if we have 20 layers, I think that'll be a pretty nice thick book that it would be great to have a hardcover edition for. So we're talking about it. I no promises.
Yeah, I feel you
and
there.
if Mike and Scott are watching this, they're like, why is he saying that?
Yeah. I feel you there for sure. I know when we did Out of the Box, like, we had to get to a certain point in the stretch goals to get the full book in there. And once we did that, it was fine as far as the size. But we didn't really think about it when we started it in those terms of, are we going to have too much cover? I think it was just kind of a little bit of an ego pride thing of wanting to make a hardback book and having a hardback book to put on the shelf with our names on it. So we were just like, from the get-go, we're just like, it's going to be a hardback.
It's a great thing to do, and the cover itself is really beautiful. Jack Kaiser, drew that cover, and Mark Radel and did the sort of layout, and Scott brought it all together to make it look awesome. And so, I think it's certainly worthy of it just based on the art alone. And all of the art in the thing really is very good. So it's great. I don't know about a Hydro 74 special cover option, but that does sound. I do love Hydro 74's work.
If the Kickstarter does $1 million,
you heard it from Dave.
So go out there and pledge. No, we don't know that's a real thing. But it seems like a good number anyway.
It does seem like a good number. Yeah. We'll take $1 million.
So I want to thank you for coming on last minute. We've been at it for about 1 hour and 10 now, so it's probably time for me to relinquish my hold upon you and send you forth to do nerdy things in the world.
Listen, Dave, I need to thank you. So the timing could not be better. Kickstarter day one. Thank you for asking me on. But also thanks for hanging out this weekend and playing games. This was really fun.
It has been a fun weekend, and it's been a fun extended weekend full of James Introcaso.
That's right. Yeah, you can't get enough of me. Of me. Just wait till I can close this social distance between us, and I'm sitting at your table looking at you all the time.
Soon, hopefully.
Soon.
But, like I said, thanks for coming on, and until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.
And we're out. That did work.